¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo están todos, amigas y amigos? En su programa Raíces Árabes, transmitido por raícesárabes.tv o por Facebook o YouTube. Usted puede compartir la señal de Facebook para que estén viendo sus amistades. Bueno, hoy día es un día especial. Tenemos un invitado desde la ciudad de Nueva York. Es un religioso judío, un rabino judío, Yisroel Dovid Weiss. Él nos va a estar hablando de la situación, de cómo comienza, la situación, lo que está sucediendo hoy día en Tierra Santa, en Palestina. Pero yo quiero agradecer a Yisroel que esté ya en línea con nosotros. Es un honor tenerlo y quiero comenzar inmediatamente con una pregunta que nos explique acerca de la religión judía, de la religión primitiva, la tradicionalista, porque queremos conocerles un poco más a fondo. Yisroel Dovid Weiss.
Greetings, and it's a great honor and privilege to be on this program. It's an honor and privilege because it is part of our commandments that when we see a desecration of God's name, a falsification of our religion, and harm being done in the name of our religion, that we should be outspoken, that we should speak up and let the world know that they are being duped, they are being fooled, and it's a crime is being perpetrated, and it's unacceptable. So being on this program to give us the opportunity to inform the world what is to clarify what is happening here is critical for us. So thank you very much for this privilege. Altogether, I was in Chile, I believe once or twice, or maybe I've tried to think back through the years. It's been quite a while, and it's a God-blessed country, and I yearn to be back there again. It's really something. So one always have to count the blessings. Remember what a blessing it is to be in Chile. Now, in regard to what Zionism is, well, first, my name is Rabbi Yisroel Dovid Weiss of Neturei Karta, Jews United Against Zionism. The Neturei Karta means protectors of the city in Aramaic. It comes from a term of the Talmud of the Jewish teaching. And it is a name that was given to the ones who are living in the Holy Land, in Jerusalem and Al-Quds, and they were outspoken. They were the ones who spoke out clearly against this influx, against this movement of Zionism that started around 100 odd years ago. And so now let me explain, why did these people speak out against Zionism? Judaism is a religion of 3,000 years. Moses went up on Mount Sinai and took the Torah from the Almighty and gave it to the Jewish people. We made a covenant with God to be subservient to God and uphold the laws of the Torah. And that is all what Judaism is about, to uphold the laws of the Torah and to be people call it the people of the book. Now, part of this religion, the basics of the religion is just as the Almighty is compassionate, we should be compassionate, to be a holy nation. That's what the laws are, to elevate us, to bring us close to God, to his bidding. Zionism is a movement that started a mere 100 odd years ago. It has nothing to do with godliness. On the contrary, it is a transformation from spirituality into base nationalism, into a concept, an ideology. People got together and they decided they want to form a group that will have a land, that they aspire to have a country, a nation, that there should be a nation that is not a second-class nation compared to others. They're a proud nation. They have an Olympic team. They have people who win the Nobel Prize, and they have a strong army and all the trappings of a nation. That is not what Judaism is. Judaism, as I said, is to be spiritually holy, to be subservient to God. Judaism dictates that since the destruction of the temple, King Solomon's temple, and then this around 2,000 years ago, this occurred. We were put under oath by God that we were warned and put under oath that we should not attempt to try to reinstate a Jewish sovereignty, a Jewish nation. We believe that we were given the Torah and by Moses, and we went up to the Holy Land. It says in the Torah that God required of us to be on a very high level of holiness, and if not, as the words of Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, all the prophets, they warned that if we will not be on that high level required, we will be banished from the land. And that happened with the destruction of the temple. That's what all the prophets spoke about. And once we were sent into exile, this 2,000 years ago, God warned us that we should not attempt to return, because that's not what God wanted. We were being punished because we were not on that level that's required. So we should not attempt to return en masse. We are not to rebel against any nation. We have to be loyal citizens in every country we reside. Me in the United States, Jews of Chile have to be loyal citizens to Chile and pray for its well-being. Jews in Iran have to pray for the well-being of Iran. So Jews around the world, our requirement is to be loyal and good citizens. And we should not attempt to reinstate our own government, our own sovereignty. And we should never attempt to end exile. We believe one day the Almighty will end exile, where all humanity, God will make a miracle, where all humanity will recognize one God and serve Him in harmony. Then we will go up and God will build a temple. But not everybody will become Jewish. It will be just everybody will recognize one God and serve Him in harmony. So the concept of leaving exile, of making our own state, what the Zionists are doing currently, this is a direct rebellion against the basics of Judaism. So Judaism stands in opposition to making a so-called Jewish state, even if Palestine would have been uninhabited, even in an empty land, we would never accept the so-called Jewish state. Now that is why the rabbis stood up in opposition from day one against Zionism in the beginning of the 19th century, in the beginning of the 20th century, or the end of the 19th century, the 1890s, the Zionists started coming up. Then the chief rabbi of Palestine, his name was Rabbi Sonnenfeld, met with the king of Transjordan, and he pleaded with them. He said that we have nothing to do with this movement of Zionism. We have to see a picture of, this is David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister, reading the Declaration of Independence in 1948 in Independence Hall. Now look at this. This is a picture of the leaders of Zionism. Not one of them is covering their heads as a Jew is required. They flaunt the Star of David, who David was a holy man, yet not one of them, it's a country that they call the Jewish state. They call it the Jewish state. So imagine if you would say a Christian state and you wouldn't see one priest there. Call it a Muslim state like the Islamic Republic of Iran, and you won't see any Ayatollahs there. I mean, it is all ludicrous. It's just it's beyond words. It's beyond the pale. Now the rabbis stood up and they pleaded with the as I mentioned right at the beginning, against Zionism. But if you go further, when he passed away, that chief rabbi that I mentioned, Rabbi Sonnenfeld, the next chief rabbi was Rabbi Dushinsky, and he was in the 1940s and 1950s. Now this is a document that is from the United Nations documents. As we know, that the United Nations ratified the State of Israel in 1948. Now, the chief rabbi, that is the one who represented all the Jewish community And there was another one from the Sephardic, and these very God-fearing rabbis stood in opposition of the state. And this is the quote that's in the United Nations documents. It says, we furthermore, I'm quoting just one sentence to save time. He says, we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. Again, this is the chief rabbi, a God-fearing man, and the scholar and the leader of the Jewish communities that was there for hundreds of years. And he says, we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. This is a declaration before the United Nations, July 16th, 1947. This is the opinion of the Jewish people because, again, we are not allowed to have a state since it's because we were sent into exile by God. And that is even in an uninhabited land. The fact that they're making the state in a land that was inhabited by the majority of the people living there, the inhabitants were Muslim. The second largest community was Christian. And then the third community was the Jewish community. All three of them, all three communities opposed this influx of this Zionist movement, this whole entire movement, the ideology of Zionism, and they pleaded with the United Nations, we don't want this, because we, as a Jew, we're not allowed to have a state. We're not allowed to oppress and kill and steal. It says that in the Torah, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. This whole concept of taking the homes away from the Palestinians, like they're doing in Sheikh Jarrah now, or that's just one link of a large chain of sorrow. But what they're taking away the land from the Palestinian people, that's totally unacceptable. It's not Jewish. And it happens to be that the rabbis were backed by the whole community. When that rabbi passed on, the younger rabbis, like it was a series of rabbis, a succession of rabbis. Here's a picture of the last rabbi who's still alive today in 2002, they took up the rabbi. You can see the streets of Jerusalem. There was actually hundreds of thousands on the streets. And here alone, there was over 10,000. And these are the facts we demonstrate daily. There's constant demonstrations in the streets of Jerusalem and in the other streets also. And what happens is when they demonstrate, they get beaten. They get they're spraying on the Jewish people. It's called skunk water. It's chemicals that they have to throw out their clothing, although they're poor. This is how they treat the Jews over there, the religious Jews. And we're never militants. We don't carry arms. We don't use guns. We're just peacefully declaring for the world that the occupation is unacceptable. And there's thousands of pictures. You can go to our site. There's thousands and thousands of pictures of showing what is being done to the Jewish people, because daily they're demonstrating on the streets and pleading with the world to hear our voices, that we do not accept this occupation. This is happening not only in Jerusalem, but it's happening in Manhattan, in New York, in Washington, D.C. This is in London, in Montreal, wherever invariably, there's a very religious Jewish community. They will stand in opposition to the existence of the state of Israel, not only what they're doing presently in Sheikh Jarrah or in the old city, but the existence of the state is unacceptable to us. And because, like I say, in every point, it's against the will of the Almighty. We're not allowed to kill or steal. So we cry with the Palestinian people. We hurt with them. I just want to show just a few more pictures. You see how old men get trampled, they get beaten by the Zionists because they have no rule of God to stop them. These children get beaten. This is ongoing. Not only do they get beaten, they get arrested and assassinated, as I've said. But I just want to show you also an interesting thing is that there is a law that it's mandatory to serve in the army. But our boys and girls who turn 17, everyone becomes a criminal because they refuse to serve in the Israeli army. Here you see a picture of a girl. They demean them by putting on the uniform on them, but she's wearing this because she's behind bars. She's holding a prayer book and crying because they refuse to serve in the Israeli army. This is what Judaism is all about. We are a religion, not a nationalism. We are the antithesis of the state of Israel. It's antithetical. It is contradictory. Zionism is a transformation from religion to nationalism, and unacceptable nationalism by the Jewish people. So I'm here in New York. My parents came from Hungary. My grandparents, I had some from Poland. Almost all of them were murdered by the Zionists, by the Nazis in the Holocaust. My father escaped from Hungary when the Nazis came into Hungary, and his parents were killed in Auschwitz. All of us, we came from very religious families, yet we never, because of this happening of the Holocaust, did it enter our minds that therefore we should take Palestine away from the Palestinians. On the contrary, we said we died for God throughout our ages, and we will stand true to God. And if God says that we should not make our state, we will not make a state. And that is the requirement of a Jew. So whether it's European Jews or Jews from Palestine, we stand in unity in opposition to the occupation, and we cry and hurt with the Palestinian people.
Yisroel Dovid Weiss, muy interesante su introducción. La verdad que hay una enseñanza enorme, profunda, contundente acerca de lo que son ustedes como religión judía. ¿Cuál es el rol del Estado ocupante y cuál es la relación que tienen ustedes con el Estado ocupante de Israel? ¿Y qué opina usted de lo que dicen de los palestinos? Que ellos como Estado tienen que defenderse de los ataques de los palestinos, en este caso de Hamás, y tratan a Hamás como terroristas porque ellos reciben los ataques de Gaza y bueno, y ellos repelen con todo un ejército armado, con todo un poder logístico increíble, y donde han muerto muchas palestinas y palestinos, incluyendo más de 60 niños. Cuéntanos un poquito acerca de la situación actual, lo que está pasando ahora en la Tierra Santa.
What is going on today is just like I say, one other link in this chain, in this long chain of tragedy. The Zionists keep on testing the waters, how far they can go and get away with it. So they go to the old city. They try to do as far as they can go. They make another settlement. The world screams that it's unacceptable. They'll take a baby step back. In the meantime, they went and they built another settlement. Then, of course, the best defense is offense. So instead of saying that we think we can, we should, and they right away start accusing the Palestinian people of being anti-Semitic and hating the Jewish people and attacking them. When the whole issue started because they decided to create a state. The whole problem started there. Jews and Muslims, Jews and Arabs lived together in harmony. We babysat each other's children. We have pictures of how we lived together in peace and harmony. Anybody knows the history, knows that we lived in the same courtyards. And even though we have a distinct difference of religion between Islam and Judaism, this was never an impediment to coexistence. This is not a religious conflict. We both believe in one God, and we were always able for hundreds of years to live together in peace, both in Palestine, and which was under the Ottoman Empire, right, the Ottoman rule, or in any other Arab or Muslim land. In fact, God requires of us to show gratitude for the good that is done to us. When we were suffering in the Inquisition and the Crusades in Europe, the Muslim countries opened their doors and embraced us and gave us a home, and we flourished in all these lands, and there was no necessity for human rights groups to protect us. So we flourished there. We grew beautiful. Our great rabbis came from all these Muslim and Arab lands, and that is how our life went on till Zionism came along and threw a rock into this beautiful, how would you say, framework, into this beautiful concept, or whatever you would say, and that of this coexistence. So the Jews were living together in the Holy Land. Zionists came along and they decided that they have to have control and their own sovereignty over the land. And all of a sudden, Jews became suspect in many lands. People confused the two, between Judaism and Zionism, and then there's attacks and things happen. But what is the cause? What is the root cause of all of this? A simple case of an unwelcome neighbor moving in into the area. And not because he's Jewish was he unacceptable. These were troublemakers. These were agitators. They came into the area where Jews were living together in the same towns. Now they came here, and then they're claiming that some Arabs are attacking them. Now I'm not condoning. We're not condoning the violence. But what will you expect of a human being when they're constantly oppressed and attacked? You will automatically, action brings a reaction. So then when they respond, the Muslim people to Sheikh Jarrah, they make demonstrations or whatever, right away the Zionists accuse them of being anti-Semitic and haters of Jews. That's unacceptable. We revile. This is repugnant to hear this. And then not only that, but they attack them like they attack our people, the religious Jewish people. And then by us, they don't have the luxury of claiming that we're attacking them. Yet they brutally attack us. So us, they just try to stifle that, and for instance, our Facebook page they close down because we report on this. We're not anti-Semitic, so they don't let the word get out to the world what's happening, and the world doesn't even know what's happening to religious Jews. But to the Palestinians, all they do is say to the world, "Oh, it's nothing. These people are terrorists. They're attacking us." It's not true. They are attacking the Palestinians. They stole their land. They stole their homes. So this is again, we're not condoning the violence, but this is what's happening is people are not, they're responding from their oppression. And we have to understand, and the way to stop this bloodshed, because not only the Palestinians are dying, which is, of course, a not unacceptable, a genocide, a tragedy, and whatever word, I don't know how to the exact wording for it, but also then when Jewish people get attacked or die, and then who is responsible for that? You know who's responsible? The one who agitated, who brought this all about. The Zionists, their hands are covered in blood of both the Palestinian and the Jewish people. They are the exacerbator of anti-Semitism. So what's happening presently, there may be a ceasefire just now. Thank God that they're stopping to throw their bombs on Gaza. But that's not the solution. Because a ceasefire just means to stop. It doesn't mean the end. So how long will this be quiet? And also, what about all the over 1,000, almost 2,000 people that we know that have been wounded? And when they say wounded, it doesn't mean a scratch on the hands. It means a serious wound. And the people that have killed, the families that are all affected, mentally affected, psychologically affected, the trauma, the terrible damage is beyond words and irreparable. It's something. And this is ongoing. Today, last year, the year before, for 73 years and more. So we look at this, what's happening now, and we say it's one more link in a chain of a crime, would say against humanity, we say a crime against God. What people say inhumane, we say it's ungodly. It's against God and it's against our Jewish religion. We hurt and cry with the Palestinian people. We will not be silent with God's help. And we want the world to plead with their leaders in Chile. And I know in Chile happens to be, there's a lot of Palestinian people in parliament, and they're good people there, and they're people who hear, and their hearts should be opened, and to plead with the leaders in the United States and so forth, that they should not be duped or intimidated by the Zionist lobby, and by silliness, by really illogical claims. The claim of the Zionists is totally illogical. They've come into a fabric, a beautiful fabric that was there for hundreds of years of coexistence, and all of a sudden they're claiming that there's no solution except to banish the Palestinians, when they are the ones who encroached on the lives of these beautiful communities, of the Muslim, Christian, Jewish communities there. And since they came, as all the problems started. Why can't the world use logic and understand? And I will say that with God's help, you have with the USSR, it ended peacefully. And even though it was etched in stone and they didn't allow religion, but then when that ended and people look back and they say, you see, something could change. The Roman and the Greek empires stopped even though they were so powerful. This occupation doesn't mean that it's hopeless. It can end. It will end. In the Torah it says, God says, why are you rebelling against me? It will not be successful. This will end. The question is how much more bloodshed and suffering. The South Africa had apartheid. Today, if you will ask a child, is it acceptable? Is it possible to be acceptable that you should say that the blacks are second-class citizens, or that, like in the United States in the South, which I remember in my youth, that there was still, and there's possibly still there were places that marked no Jews, Negroes, and dogs allowed. And they had to have separate entrances and things, separate faucets to drink from. If you will ask a child who's born today, from the young child who's 12 or 13 and who doesn't know the history, you'll say, is it possible that they had such a sign? He'll say it's impossible for distinguished people, lawful people, humane people to have such a concept. Yet South Africa existed and was a recognized state in the United Nations, and Nelson Mandela was rotting in prison while they had the state ongoing and was given the greatest respect. But today, nobody would accept it. It would be considered criminal. What the Zionism is doing, the state of Israel, is totally criminal, unacceptable, and that we have to have the world to wake up to this. They will wake up, but we have to really plead with our leaders and let them hear and pray to God that this should happen soon, peacefully.
Bueno, impactante su relato. Quisiera hacer otra pregunta, porque el mundo entero ignora, desconoce la realidad de lo que pretende el Estado ocupante, engañando al mundo entero. Y por ignorancia, por desconocimiento de la palabra de Dios, la Biblia en este caso, y de su religión, el judaísmo, el sionismo está engañando al mundo y caen en el engaño primero en los Estados Unidos y muchos en Latinoamérica, y siguen el judaísmo o el Estado ocupante. Y hay pastores evangélicos acá en Chile, muchos de la iglesia evangélica, lamentablemente por ignorancia o por desconocer la realidad, o no han estudiado acerca de esto profundamente, aunque los comentarios bíblicos lo enseñan acerca de los judaizantes. Pero en Chile, por ejemplo, Yisroel Dovid Weiss, usan incluso la bandera del Estado ocupante político en Tierra Santa en los púlpitos. Los pastores, algunos pastores usan la bandera y también usan instrumentos como la Torá o los 7 espíritus de Dios, que son totalmente ajenos a la palabra de Dios y a su religión, el judaísmo.
A very good question. It's critical that this is brought to the attention of people of the world, this question, because it looks very confusing. You find that the Zionists have a rabbinate and a chief rabbi, so it looks very holy. We say it's just a facade to legitimize their takeover, just like they use the Star of David and the name Israel, even though they are a bunch of heretics. And I'm sorry, that's not the one that I showed you earlier. This is actually rabbis, I'm sorry, who are in by the Orient House giving over a letter of loyalty to the Palestinian Authority. That's this picture. But I was showing you before the picture of the Zionist leaders, that they are totally non-religious. In fact, I would like to just bear with me a second. We have a book called, it's called Traditional Torah Opposition to Zionism, Historical Documents. Now, part of those documents, we have documents of the Zionists. Now, I'm just going to quote Theodor Herzl, and this is what he said in his own diary, page 14. He writes like this: the way to solve the problem of anti-Semitism is to speak to the head priest of Vienna, to get an appointment with the Pope, to make a mass conversion of all the Jews of Austria to Catholicism. That's the way to stop anti-Semitism, that everybody should convert out of the Jewish religion. It should be done on a Sunday, in the middle of the day, with music and pride publicly. We are the last generation that held on to the faith of our forefathers. The conversion will be in St. Stephen's Cathedral. And just to add a little one more, Vladimir Jabotinsky was the founder of revisionist Zionism, wrote in an article in a Haaretz newspaper, October 1919. And he wrote, in the national home that they're going to create, the Zionists, we will announce that those Jews who have on themselves the rust of exile will be second class. We'll repeat. In national home, we will announce that those Jews who have on themselves the rust of exile and they refuse to shave off their beards and earlocks, it's called payos in Hebrew, earlocks, will be second-class citizens and not have the right to vote. In other words, a religious Jew who looks like a religious Jew should not have a right to vote. Theodor Herzl said they should all drop the religion. These are the fathers of this supposed heroes of the Jewish people by making a Jewish state. It's mind-blowing. Now, these settlers are almost entirely, they do not come from the very religious families, certainly. You won't find them. They're coming from, like I say, from New York, from Williamsburg, from London and Stamford Hills, from Montreal, Canada, from Argentina. You have in Argentina a beautiful community, a very religious community over there that was started by Rabbi Eckstein. The very religious communities you will never find. Maybe there's one aberration, but you will never find settlers from these communities because the very religious understand that it's totally contradictory to have this state. The settlers come either from non-religious families or marginally religious that don't know their religion, that therefore they support Zionism. They're gullible, they're idealistic, and they fall into the trap of the Zionist propaganda and emotions that they play. And here in the United States, the Zionists constantly play on emotions and they say, 2,000 years we were in exile and now God gave us back the land. They count on the ignorance of the people who are non-religious, and they don't know that in that manner, they'll be able to get people to support them. They use the Holocaust. They say, good, people died. How many millions of Jews died, were murdered? So therefore, we have to have a state and God's giving us back our land. They willfully misinterpret, they misconstrue and falsify and ignore the clear commands of the Torah that we are forbidden to have a state or to occupy another people. They count on the ignorance of the Jews, and they count on the lack of knowledge of the Christian communities, the evangelistic Christians, that they look for them for support. They have more evangelistic Christians supporting them than they have Jews. Because they know that these communities won't have any knowledge of the truth of the Jewish religion that forbids us to have this state. So the settlers you will find are almost entirely from non-religious families or marginally religious, that are from the ones that are that incorporated Zionism, or Zionism incorporated these people into their religion. Just like their chief rabbi, I'm not denying that that chief rabbi from way back then, they were knowledgeable people, but they were rotten apples. They were able to find people who are knowledgeable. You always find in a barrel of apples, you find some rotten ones. They were always able to find somebody for a little money or respect that they gave them. They were able to get people to speak what they wanted of them. And that is what they have, a rabbinate and a chief rabbi. And that is the ones who are able to convince these settlers that they're doing God's work by going out and putting themselves and their children in the most dangerous places by inciting and taking away land from another people. But what they're doing is not only they're causing they're putting their children at danger, but they're inciting and they're putting the whole Jewish nation, all the Jewish people around the world in danger, because they're driving a wedge between the Jews and the Muslims, between the Jews and the Arabs, between the Jews and people around the world who are witnessing what is happening and are unfortunately conferring these terrible crimes on the Jewish populace around the world, even though we around the world, the Jews, stand in opposition to this, but it's not known to the world because of the power of the Zionist PR and their public relations and their intimidation of the media.
Muy interesante su respuesta. Queda claramente entendido que hay un engaño en el mundo, se provoca una desorientación, y acá en Chile sobre todo hay una tremenda confusión por parte de algunos evangélicos y líderes pastores evangélicos que están en un error tremendo. Bueno, Yisroel, quiero decirle que para que este programa sea una realidad tenemos algunos auspicios que presentar. Así que vamos a ir a comerciales y ya regresamos con esta importante entrevista.
أهله ورجاله رجاله ومحلى جباله ماري مكوله ونياله محروس بقدرة الله وهمة أهله
Agradecemos a nuestros queridos auspiciadores y no puedo dejar de mencionar a Telas Textilem de la calle Buenos Aires, también otros amigos como el caso de Telas Ales Hermanos de la calle Caliche, Textil Casís en Macul, Textil Casís en Macul y también en Macul Comercial Alameda. Grandes empresas que están apoyando al programa Raíces Árabes con sus auspicios. Yisroel Dovid Weiss, la respuesta fue muy buena, pero podríamos profundizar un poco más acerca de la respuesta, ya que estamos volviendo de comerciales.
Yes, and let me just touch one other point that's very important that we were speaking about the settlers. Excuse me. It happens to be that the settlers are the marginal of the Jewish populace. The very religious of hundreds of thousands around the world and in Palestine, in occupied Palestine, in the streets of Jerusalem, the very core of the religious community, as I was showing you the pictures before, you have tens and hundreds of thousands who are anti-Zionist. They don't even register with the state. They don't go to the army. They don't even go to elections because they refuse to give legitimacy to this state. But you see always the settlers, so people think that there's a large amount of religious Jews who support the Zionist entity and their project. But it's not true. You're always seeing them in the news because they're always up front and doing the damage and doing what they're doing. So their faces are seen, but that is not. This is a marginal community. The ones who are the core Judaism is the ones who are living there for hundreds of years in Al-Quds and Jerusalem and the other areas together with the Arabs and Muslims or the Jewish communities around the world. Like I said, you go to any place, London, Canada, in other countries, and you go to in Europe, you will find in Belgium, in Antwerp, Belgium, you find the very religious communities. They're all anti-Zionist. The settlers is an aberration, and it's just people who are duped and fell into the propaganda of Zionism by the power of the Zionists using these rabbis and so forth. That said, on that same thread, we'll go to the evangelistic Christians. With God's help, the Zionists have a chief rabbi who traipses around the world, and they speak to the people as if they're speaking in the name of God because they use the Jewish garb, and they masquerade in the Jewish in a beard. The chief rabbi has a beard, and he puts on a yarmulke. Although their president and prime minister doesn't bother to cover their heads, but they're a puppet. They're the one who goes out to their PR leader, which is the chief rabbi. He does go with a yarmulke and a beard, and he signs off on all the crimes they do. And he walks around and he rolls his eyes in holiness and says, God gave us the land, and the only reason why we're doing to the Palestinians is because they hate us, and he claims that the Zionists are the victims, which is totally not true. So the evangelistic Christians, they hear this from these people who call the chief rabbi and so forth, and they buy into it. Now we have the same problem here in the United States, and every year there's a big convention in Washington D.C. in the Washington Center. It's a very large convention hall where the evangelistic Christians get together, and every single year we go out there with signs from our Jewish communities, and we stand outside there and we try to speak, and some people listen to us, but unfortunately most of the people just go into the convention center and hear Hagee and all these other leaders of their movement who espouse and speaking about supporting Judaism and supporting the Jewish people who are in danger and so forth, and they pour money into the Zionist project called the Zionist State of Israel, and it's very unfortunate. We try to plead with them. We try to use logic and say, first of all, would I come and tell you as a Christian how your religion should be? I think you would understand that it would be a very we say in Jewish chutzpah. It would be very unacceptable for me to dictate to you what your religion is all about. I think that it would be proper that if they would like to understand the Jewish religion, they should go to the leading rabbis, the leading schools, which is Brisk, in Jerusalem, or which is or in New York, that we have tremendously distinguished rabbinical colleges, and invariably, I repeat, the very religious schools are all anti-Zionist. Now they should be asking themselves, these are Jews who gave their lives for God. We have private schooling. We pay for every child's education. We pay for our kosher foods. We pay for our clothing because it's special clothing. Our lives is given to God. And yet, why would we oppose the state of Israel with self-hating Jews? We give our lives for God in our Judaism. And these are respectable, distinguished communities. So they should be asking themselves why. At least they should try to understand why are these communities anti the state of Israel. And yet you will find the ones that are very questionably, their Judaism is very questionable and compromised. And these are the ones that are supporting the state. How come it goes on that system? They should be asking these rabbis, why do you stand in opposition to the existence of the state? And they should respect us. And they should respect our opinion about the state of Israel, that it's not acceptable. And they should not be supporting the state of Israel. And they should not be supporting what they're doing to a people created by God, the Palestinian people, God's creation. If it would be God, God forbid, an animal they did it to, they would be up in arms. Right? And here you're talking about human beings that are created by God. How could we be silent and accept what's happening to the Palestinians because simply a group of people came along some 100-odd years ago and they decided to claim that it's godly given to them the land? This is unacceptable, and it defies logic, and we really should be standing up to these people and demanding of them that they should be at least take the time and effort to speak to the Jewish communities, the God-fearing, very religious communities, and ask them why they oppose the occupation.
Bueno, la verdad que muy interesante todo lo que nos está enseñando, pero hábleme más acerca de la motivación de todo el mundo, o lo que se dice en todo el mundo es lo siguiente, que el Estado ocupante está ahí porque esa tierra les fue prometida. ¿Qué tiene que decirnos usted acerca de eso, Dovid Weiss?
Yes, we do have, of course, with Moses. Anybody who studies the Bible, it's translated, and all our books are translated. They are very accepted by Jewish people, very good translations. And if you look, it's clear to us. Moses made a covenant. Jewish people made a covenant with God. God required it of us to go up to the Holy Land, but it was because at that time it was the will of the Almighty that we should go up and practice Judaism. And by the way, anybody who was living there who accepted not to worship idols, they were allowed to live there. And in fact, for the Jewish people who were reluctant to go up to the Holy Land, because of that, we were punished, and we had to be 40 years in the wilderness. It's known the story. But we only follow the will of God. We were required to go up to the Holy Land. And again, as I say, all the people who, if they wanted to serve God, not worship idols, they had the permission to be there in that land. But then we were told by the Almighty that we were not up to par, and we were banished from the land. So we do believe the concept that it is a promised land to us. But we will, at the same time, since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, we are forbidden to make any attempt to re-establish a Jewish sovereignty or to try to take back that land by force. Certainly not. It's unacceptable. And we do believe that eventually the Almighty will make a metaphysical change in the world where all humanity will recognize one God, and then God will build a temple, only God, without any human intervention. We say that in our prayers. Anybody can read the Jewish prayers. We say it on Tisha B'Av, the day that we mourn the destruction of the temple. It says that the Jerusalem was destroyed in fire, and the Almighty will rebuild it in fire. It is a spiritual happening by God. When that happens, all the nations will join arms, we say. All the nations will make one unit, and serve God in harmony. That is why the Muslim nations never deemed us a threat, and we were able to enjoy the hospitality and coexistence in every Arab and Muslim land, even though they were scholars. They knew the Jewish books. They knew what our Bible says. We were not a threat because they know that we are forbidden to take up arms and to try to take over the land. So we're not a threat to them. So the concept of a promised land, yes, there is that concept. There is a concept that God ultimately will build the temple, and there is a concept of that we believe that we have this like a nation. It says you should be to me a mamlechus kehanim v'goy kodesh. We should be a kingdom of priests and of priests and a holy nation. In other words, that we are supposed to, according to our covenant, serve God with many 613 commandments, day and night like priests. So we believe we have the concept of holiness, and that holiness is what God wants of us, to be compassionate, to do good for the world, and people should look at us and see how it means to be godliness. And that is what we strive for in our daily lives. And ultimately, that is what it means that God wants us to exist in the Holy Land as a holy nation. But that does not mean that the other people of the world that have no right to be there now, or they have no right to be. Ultimately, all the nations will go up and serve God then. When we have no will or desire to try to convert people. And anybody knows the Jewish religion, we are, on the contrary, we dissuade people from becoming Jewish because of all the requirements, and that the people suffer anti-Semitism. We do believe that we will be able to live together, though, and all serve God, and you don't have to be Jewish to serve God.
Bueno, usted insiste en contarnos que antes del 48 vivían en paz y armonía y en mucha amistad judíos, musulmanes y cristianos. Iban a los colegios juntos, es lo que hemos estado escuchando a lo largo de toda su presentación. Y yo quiero hacerle una pregunta, una última pregunta. ¿Cuál es la situación actual hoy en Tierra Santa y cuál es su sentimiento hacia los palestinos?
There's a book called The Rabbis Speak Out, a 130-year record of religious Jewish opposition to Zionism. This encompasses and shows the leading rabbis from around the world. I opened the page to Rabbi Yisroel Meir Cohen. He lived from 1839 to 1933. That was before the state was created. He was one of the codifiers of the Jewish laws. He was from Vilna in Lithuania. And he wrote, and he's accepted in all the Jewish world, one of the main codifiers of Jewish law. And he wrote in his books, the Zionists are dead limbs of our people, which causes the entire body to rot. I'm just giving one line. In other words, that it's a dead limb that they cause the entire body to rot. It's so unacceptable. And I could go on from throughout Europe, the rabbis this is from London, from Hungary, from Middle East, from Sephardic countries, Russia. I mean, I could go on and on and on. They're from all over, and they all stood in opposition. Zionism, we have to, again, be very clear. Zionism was not a Jewish movement. It was a political movement. They tried to incorporate the religion to give it a facade of legitimacy, to able to intimidate and silence. So when people speak up against them, they could attack them as being anti-Semitic. But we have to be clear. Do not, and this is my message, do not call it a Jewish state, because that's the way that they entrap you, and they will be able to attack you as being anti-Semitic. It is a Zionist state. It is not a Jewish state. And in fact, because we are Jewish, we oppose the existence of the state of Israel. It's against God. And we want the Palestinian people to know that we cry and we hurt with them. We personally went to Sabra Shaltila, Baja Barajna, other refugee camps. We went to visit and cry with the people of Palestine. My brothers and sisters in Palestine constantly urge me to give over the message to the Palestinian people and tell them that we are humiliated and we are frustrated that we cannot do more for them, but we feel their suffering constantly. It is not a Jewish issue. It is a rebellion against both. It's a rebellion against God and the Jewish religion, and it's a crime. There's no way to whitewash what they're doing. That said, the people in Chile, they have, I know, a lot of a Christian Palestinian enclave there, beautiful community there I went to visit, and we want them to know that there was a very large, as they know, of course, a Christian community that was the second largest. The Jewish community was the smallest. All three, as I said, were anti-occupation, and we want them to know that we feel with them, and that there's not enough words for us to describe how we will stand with them continually till with God's compassion, and we pray that it should be speedy and peaceful, the total dismantlement of this unacceptable occupation that is happening now.
Bueno, Yisroel Dovid Weiss, agradecemos esta entrevista directamente con ustedes desde Nueva York. Muy agradecido del programa Raíces Árabes y canal raícesárabes.tv. Está muy agradecido de haberlo tenido. Queremos que nos dé su último mensaje para todos los televidentes.
That's what I wanted. That's what I forgot. I wanted to talk about that. I knew there was a second part of it. Yes, again, I had we lived together, children, the youth, the older people. It was a given. It's just like people in Chile. Understand? You live with your neighbors. Whether you're Jewish, you're Christian, you're Muslim, you don't think, oh, do I have to somehow think about it twice because he's a different religion? Do I have to jump over a barrier because he's a different religion? You live as neighbors. This was a given. The difference of religion was never an issue of coexistence. In fact, because we were very religious and because the Muslim people were God-fearing and very religious, we knew that we could entrust each other with our children to babysit, because we do that, the God-fearing. So on the contrary, because of the very fact that we were very religious, we were able to coexist so beautifully. And this is how the facts on the ground, but this is not only, and everybody, when I meet old Christian, Muslim people from Palestine, when I meet old Jewish people, everybody has the same narrative, just different stories. But the basics of the story is that we helped each other, we supported each other, we were concerned with each other's lives, and everybody has a beautiful tale to tell about how they helped each other in hardship and celebrated and were happy with each other's happiness. This is a fact on the ground. Any old person from either one of the communities, from the Jewish, Muslim, or Christian community, they all have the same story. And Zionism is turning the history on its head, and with a new narrative, as if there was a religious conflict here, which is so repugnant, so revolting to hear, and so hurtful, and it's not true. There's enough old people alive today, God should give them all long, happy years, that they can tell you this truth of our history. And this will be brought back. It's a simple aberration now that we're living through. But we have to be careful. Again, not say the Jews or the Muslims. It's not that issue. It's nothing to do with Jews or Muslims. It's a political movement called the Zionist State of Israel. And not be intimidated. Speak up and pray to God, because the Almighty is the Almighty, and He could bring an end. So we should pray to Him, just like apartheid stopped, the Greek Empire, Roman, all these things stopped. We can pray to God that He should make it happen speedily and peacefully through God's wonder. We don't know how, but He can make this thing end with a total removal of the occupation of this impediment to peace called the Zionist State of Israel. God should help sooner nowadays. I'm looking forward, yearning to be able to say to the Palestinian people, here's your homes, here's your life back the way it should be. And ultimately, we're looking for the day when the Almighty will reveal His glory, where all humanity will recognize one God, and there should be peace in the world.
Bueno, agradecer al rabino de la religión judía Yisroel Dovid Weiss por este tremendo mensaje contundente, una enseñanza muy grande, y creo que con esto van a salir de confusión muchos cristianos que tenían algunas dudas o estaban confundidos. Yo creo que debemos profundizar con la Santa Biblia, la palabra de Dios, y escudriñarla, estudiar un poco más para entender lo que este rabino de la religión judía nos acaba de presentar y enseñar. Bueno, y nosotros agradecemos la presencia de todos y cada uno de ustedes a través de la pantalla de sus computadores y televisores y algunos desde su celular. Que Dios les bendiga y será hasta una próxima oportunidad.
جلو محلى جباله ما رنقوله ونياله محروس بقدرة الله وهمة أهله ورجاله